Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, all the way from California to India to Dubai. We are honored that you took some time out of your day today to join us for this session. We are all set to resume our extraordinary series regarding the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, what they are and how we can get involved, and so much more. We hope you enjoy this session and make the most out of it. So just sit back and enjoy this candid conversation with our brilliant speaker today, Dhruvik Parikh. I'll say a little tidbit about what Sustainable Development Goals are. I believe we have a short video right after that, and then we'll go on to some Menti questions. But basically, the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by the United Nations member states in 2015 as a universal call for action to transform our world by 2030. So this is done by taking efforts towards solving various global issues and promoting peace and prosperity towards millions. Our aim is to draw attention and create awareness of the efforts being taken around the globe to achieve these goals and recognize change makers like Dhruvik who are driving the change in their communities. So thank you so much for joining us, Dhruvik. Where are you calling us from? I'd love to have the audience here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm calling from Washington State in the United States.
Awesome. So yeah, take it away. I believe there's a short video to be seen. So we will be screen sharing that soon.
And I invite you all to join me in grasping it.
Great. So last session we did discuss the SDG 5, gender equality, and the SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation, both very interesting topics. But today, I hope you have enough energy because we are joined by our youngest speaker yet to be discussing, like you saw in the video, SDG 7, which is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So before we dive into our the meat of the topic today, we are going to be having just a cute, brief, some Menti questions to get to know our audience and let the ice be broken for the session today. So wherever you're joining us from, whether YouTube Live or Facebook Live, please scan this QR code. It will bring you to the Menti website where you can participate in our question and answer, or you can just go to www.menti.com and use the code 4873303. Great. So our first question is, from where are you tuning in? Where are you joining us from? There's a picture of the Earth, which I am really happy to see that people are joining us from this Earth, which is a beautiful Earth. And there are no aliens in this Zoom call or this live thing. So I know I can say I'm joining in from Nashua, New Hampshire in the east coast of the US. Wow, we have some responses here. Malaysia, Singapore, and India. So already we are across so many time zones. Bhuj, Pune, Indonesia. Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. The United States, LA, China. This is awesome. Oh, Hyderabad, London. Wonderful. Boston, Andhra Pradesh, Africa. Wow. Angola. Not from Mars for sure. Hong Kong. You know, it's amazing seeing such a diverse range of places where everybody is joining us in from, because the subjects that we're talking about, again, are things that everybody from across the world should be paying attention to. Um, and if we all take this time today to learn about it, we can make our little own changes in our own little corners of the world. And it'll make a big change overall. Pittsburgh, this is amazing. New York, Canada, Spain. Wonderful. Bangalore, Penang. Please forgive me if I pronounce that incorrectly. Wonderful. Thank you so much all for responding to that question. Our next question is, what is the importance of renewable energy according to you? You can wait for some answers to trickle in. This might be a question that you feel compelled to answer in more than just one word. The need for an hour is our first response. Interesting. Like we saw in that brief video, there are so many different types of way that renewable energy can translate to many different causes that are seemingly at first unrelated, but they are all interconnected. Eco-friendly, healthy environment. Yes. A responsibility we must all take up, correct? To sustain a better life. I love that. It is a looming necessity. That is very correct. It is a dire need. Absolutely. I'm really glad that everybody feels from their heart the gravity of the situation. Natural source of energy by Mother Nature. That's right. If we are to continue living on this earth, we have to make sure we take care of it. Unless you want to go to Mars, like that one person said. Saving small villages across the world. Very pertinent. All right. So we're back now, and now we begin our topic. So I'll give a brief introduction to Dhruvik, and then he will move on with his presentation. But let's just talk about, energy today has gained the utmost importance as the resources of our planet continue to get depleted. It is our responsibility as individuals to adopt sustainable methods in order to protect our planet. We have an esteemed speaker on board today. He will be sharing his insightful experiences and guiding us in how we can achieve this goal collectively. So I'll give a little introduction on Dhruvik. Dhruvik is a junior studying computer science at Stanford University. While in high school, Dhruvik conducted numerous independent research projects on topics ranging from producing biodiesel using agricultural waste to developing a better battery mechanism to store renewable energy on the grid. His work earned him the top prize at the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair and placed him on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list in 2018. That's amazing. So far in college, he has conducted research on sustainable agriculture at the Stanford Sustainability and Artificial Intelligence Lab, and has built and deployed a solar home network for unelectrified communities in Zimbabwe. That's awesome. Dhruvik is passionate about sustainability and education, and he wants to get more young people excited about using science to promote sustainability and ultimately fight climate change. That's amazing. I'm so excited to hear more about you and your presentation today, Dhruvik. So I'm just going to let the audience know really quickly if you have any questions. We're gonna go on to the presentation, but during the presentation, if you have any questions for Dhruvik, make sure you ask your heart away in the YouTube or the Facebook live stream comment sections, and we will be sure to answer them after the presentation. But take it away, Dhruvik. Thank you so much for joining us here today, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
All right. Thank you so much, Jenny, for the really nice introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you all over Zoom to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is energy and sustainable development, of course. So as you mentioned, I'm going to first just go through kind of brief presentation where I'll talk a little bit about some of my experiences and my thoughts on energy. And then, of course, we'll have the Q&A. So if you do have any questions, just wanted to reiterate, I'm always happy to answer any questions. But yeah, so to get started, I want to give a little more context and color on who I am and kind of give everyone more context on where this presentation is coming from. So as you already mentioned, I guess as you haven't mentioned yet, I'm 20 years old. I'm from Washington in the USA. Currently I'm a student, so I'm an undergraduate computer science student at Stanford University. Now, although I'm studying computer science in university, my interests in a career and application way are more focused on energy and sustainable development. And so a lot of my activities on campus include various organizations that are working in this space. So as you mentioned, I did some research at the Stanford Sustainability and Artificial Intelligence Lab. I also directed the Stanford Clean Tech Challenge, which is Stanford's global online energy hackathon that we run every year. And I'm also Stanford's largest energy student organization, the Stanford Energy Club. And academically, my interests are pretty wide-ranging, but essentially it's everything that can in some way relate to energy is what I'm interested in. So that's ranging from computer science to chemistry to economics and the earth sciences. So if you can't already tell, I'm excited about all things energy. And then that's really what I love to do. So for me, my story in energy actually started even before I got to college. It's something that has been with me for a really long time. And it goes all the way back to when I was in grade school. And in school, they taught us about climate change, or as we called it at the time, global warming. And to be honest, when I first learned about this, I was really, really scared. And I think it makes sense, right? It's posed as this kind of existential risk, and the consequences of climate change are really jarring and scary in the sense that, we hear things that, oh, the earth is warming and going to become this fireball that's inhospitable to life as we know it today. And everything is going to change and species are going to go extinct and all these really scary things. But I was just a kid. And so I thought, I hope that the adults can figure this one out. And maybe when I'm an adult, I can work on something less scary. But as we all know, that was not the case. The issue was not figured out. I don't think that's entirely the fault of the adults, but just kind of a lot of it is because an issue of the scale of climate change is not something that you can just solve with a silver bullet solution. There's so many different approaches and solutions that have to be a part of this bigger effort that we're making. And as I became older, that became more clear to me, and I decided that I wanted to join this effort. So when I was 14 years old and I was starting in high school, I just so happened to enroll in this new course at my school called Introduction to Science and Engineering Research. And this is a project-based learning course where students work on one project for the whole year, and that's all they do. And the projects are either science projects or engineering projects. So either you're trying to discover some new scientific knowledge that nobody's ever discovered before, or build some new device or mechanism that nobody's ever engineered before. And that kind of novelty, that really kind of innovative aspect of it was really, really exciting to me. And we actually got to choose our topics. And so for me, it was a pretty easy choice to kind of go back to this issue that I saw as really the biggest issue that our society faces. And so I decided that I wanted to tackle climate change with my project. And so that's what I did. I worked on a project, which I'll talk a little bit about in the next slide, which was basically trying to improve our usage of biofuels. And I really, really enjoyed my time working on this project. The lab aspects, the kind of research aspects, all of it was really fun for me. And I ended up continuing this for 4 more years, all throughout my time in high school. And it ended up being my main focus outside of my studies and my main attention grabber, essentially. Now, as you've probably heard from anyone who has done research before, or scientists and quotes that we see a lot online and in books, there's a lot of failures that come with doing research, and I learned that the hard way. But also, I was fortunate to have a couple successes here and there that really helped me kind of take my research and my work to the next level and broaden my reach by meeting new people who can kind of give me access to more resources, as well as share ideas with me and stuff like that. And that's what I'm trying to do myself in the time after that. So I want to talk a little bit about one of my projects here that I mentioned just now. So the first project I worked on was a biofuels project. But I want to kind of start by setting the stage by talking about agriculture. So agriculture is one of the biggest industries in the world, and it's pretty obvious why, right? We have so many people on the planet. We want to try to feed everyone. So we obviously have to be producing a lot of food. Now, there are some negative consequences to having to do this in the form of degrading soil and habitat by making room for agriculture, also in the form of carbon emissions from kind of making the soil unhealthy, as well as from emissions directly from livestock. But a third issue of agriculture is just how much waste that agriculture produces. So part of this is because of the preferences that we have as humans. We don't like to eat certain things, but also there's just some natural constraints on what parts of plants we're able to eat. For example, we can't eat some parts of wheat like straw and rice like straw. And so there's a huge amount of waste that's being produced every single day in farms and agricultural communities. Now, some of this can be repurposed as feed for livestock like cows or horses, but other forms of agricultural waste has traditionally just been thrown in the landfill. And one such example that you see on the screen here is grape pomace. And grape pomace is the waste of the wine industry. So essentially what this is when wine is made, they press the grapes and they basically are crushing the juice out of them. They take this juice, ferment it into alcohol, and sell the wine. But all of this solid material, so this includes the stems, the skins, the seeds of the grape, this is all just wasted. And so what my project was trying to do is how can I make use of this waste product and turn it back into fuel that the winery can then use to kind of run their farm for the next year and kind of make it a self-sustaining sort of thing. So that's what I did. I found a way to essentially extract the key nutrients out of this biomass and then feed those nutrients to this specialized form of yeast called an oleaginous yeast, which accumulates oils in its cells by feeding on these nutrients. Now, it just so happens that these oils bear very close similarity to vegetable oil. And vegetable oil is one of the best feedstocks for making biodiesel. And so I was actually able to use this oil that I got from the yeast and turn that into biodiesel, which can be run in any diesel engine, whether that's in the machinery to power the electricity for the winery or in their tractors or something like that. So in theory, this is a really amazing thing because the winery is able to become self-sustaining. They don't have to worry about bringing in fuel or electricity from external sources, and they're able to kind of run their own show. However, in practice, the reason why we don't see this being used today is one of the kind of common pitfalls of a lot of these strategies, which is cost. Now, because of the processing that goes into extracting these nutrients, as well as from the forming the culture for the yeast, the cost of actually running this operation ends up being higher than how much you would have to pay for just getting diesel from fossil fuels. And also, this takes some energy input to even create the biodiesel in the first place. And so it also has some marginal effect on the energy efficiency as well. But one of the, so two of the most significant threads that you can kind of pull out from this project that actually show up in all my other projects are, for one, renewable energy is much, much greater than fossil fuels. Now, this is kind of a non-negotiable that I had just decided on when I started and never really went back and reconsidered. Now, the reasons for this are not even like getting into the whole carbon situation, but just thinking about sustainability, right? When you have an option to be using renewables versus non-renewables are going to run out for you at some point. Renewables, not so much. So it seems like a no-brainer that we should try and use as much renewable things as possible. The second point is this sort of closed loop, self-sustaining concept and trying to minimize waste and repurpose waste as energy. And so eventually, as I was sort of reflecting on the projects that I'd done, I realized that they all kind of promote this concept that I call energy independence. Now, by that, I don't mean this kind of political term, energy independence, that sometimes we see in the news referring to oil and the Middle East and stuff. But instead, I mean just the abstract idea that countries and more generally regions should try and take advantage of their unique resources to generate their own energy instead of transporting it from afar. Now, just to visualize this a little bit, I live in Washington State in the United States. We do not get very much sun. We have upwards of, I think, 250 cloudy days a year, and it rains on almost all of those days. And so we really don't have that much sun. And so for a long time, when solar panels were not that efficient, it didn't really make sense for us to be using solar energy. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be generating all of our electricity in states that do get sun, like Arizona or Texas, and then setting a long wire across the continent to get electricity up here. That doesn't make any sense, right? We wouldn't want to do that. Instead, we would want to look at what resources do we actually have here that we can use instead. And so we actually have a lot of water. We have a lot of rivers and a lot of rain. And so we use hydroelectricity instead. And so this same concept applies to when you think about non-renewables. So what we're doing right now is we're generating oil in just a few parts of the world, and then we're transporting it everywhere else. And that's basically as weird, if you think about it, as what I was mentioning with solar. And so as we transition from fossil fuels to renewables, we want to make sure that we're not preserving this model of having just one or two monopolistic sort of generation areas, and then everyone else has to depend on them. Instead, everyone can just rely on what their own resources and uniqueness is. And the reason I'm really excited about this idea and passionate about its prospects are because I think it actually tries to solve the four big problems that I see with energy today. The first one is environmental. So this one is pretty obvious. When you're not having to transport things very far, then you save the carbon emissions from doing the transportation. There's also some direct environmental consequences, like we've seen a lot of oil spills from pipelines and things like this that we wouldn't have to deal with if we were just localizing the way we're doing energy. Secondary, there's economic advantages to having energy independence. So this comes in the form of avoiding this, again, monopolistic sort of structure where the place that has the most energy can sort of take advantage of the other places. Instead, everyone can take advantage of their own competitive advantage and not have to worry about these dependency networks. Third, there's political implications for this. I don't think I need to remind anyone how many wars have been started and how many lives have been lost due to how we're currently going about oil. A lot of the conflict in the last 30, 40 years are just because of political issues coming from energy, which is really unfortunate, and energy independence could give us a way around that. And finally, there's equity concerns as well. What I mean here is that when you provide electricity to an area that didn't previously have it, but you now lock them in to be dependent on some external regime or country, then there's kind of a nebulous equity argument there. So in a way, you're kind of benefiting them in the short term, but maybe you're kind of limiting their potential in the long term. Also, if we think about renewables and non-renewables, when we have communities that don't currently have access to electricity, and then we go in and install old technology from like 50 years ago that run for oil or coal, then are we actually helping them out, or are we kind of just perpetuating their cycle of poverty? I think that this is an open question, and unfortunately, there's a lot of this dependency forming going on. I'm not going to name names, but there are very large countries that entire foreign policy is based on just making other countries that are less developed being dependent on them, and I think that's not very equitable. And of course, all four of these things are trying to kind of promote the Sustainable Development Goal, number 7, yeah. So to visualize this concept a little more, I want to talk about another project that I had the chance to work on, and this project is called Voya Sol. So this is actually something I worked on when I got to college. And basically, it's a solar home network for unelectrified communities in Zimbabwe in particular, in Africa. Essentially, what a solar home system is it's a system that consists of a solar panel and a battery and a charge controller. And so essentially what you do is you use the solar panel during the daytime and when it's sunny to charge up the battery. And then at nighttime and on cloudy days, you can use the battery to have electricity 24/7. Now, we see this in all sorts of different forms. For example, there's really expensive options and really high power options like the Tesla Powerwall. There's also options that are more directed towards just giving basic electricity as well. However, just the way the economics work out is that when you try and scale this down towards just basic electricity, the upfront cost is still fairly prohibitive for individuals. And so what our innovation is why don't we make this into a network? So it's not just one individual who has to take all the costs, but actually they can share power from their system with their neighbors and actually track their neighbors' consumption and then charge them accordingly. And so what we're doing is we're empowering them to become energy entrepreneurs. They can make the investment in the device, but they're actually also kind of making back that money from their neighbors as well. And so we actually deployed this as a pilot in 10 communities in Harare and in Zimbabwe. And so far the results have been and feedback have been really positive. And we're hoping to continue this work in the future. So the reason I wanted to highlight this project and to kind of juxtapose it to the earlier project that I talked about is because I want to note that there was actually not really any kind of scientific innovation in the Voya Sol project, but it was still able to have an actual impact on real people, right? And I think this is something that is really important to highlight because for a long time, the only thing that you could really do to make progress on energy sustainability and renewables was kind of work on the scientific front, because we needed a lot of new science for this to even become feasible in the first place. But as you can see in this graph, in just a matter of 8 years, the price of solar energy has gone down by almost an order of magnitude, which is really remarkable if you think about it. And what it means is that we no longer need to just focus only on the science. There's ways we can make an impact that also look at engineering or using business and economics to make an impact. We're making an impact with the nonprofit sector. And I think this is really important, especially for youth, because not all of us have access to labs and research opportunities to do science, but I think all of us can contribute to volunteering in our community and actually implementing these on the ground. And I think that's really important to recognize. And I think we're really lucky to be in this state now because that means that we can all kind of come together and work on this problem. So with that, I'm going to close this part of the presentation. I'm happy to take any and all questions that you all have. If you think of something later, you can also always reach me by email. I'm always excited to talk about energy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dhruvik. I really, really enjoyed watching that presentation. Please, audience members, continue to be giving your questions. We'll be filtering them through and then asking them on here. We do have some prepped questions beforehand. So my first question for you, Dhruvik, is how could you propose one way to accelerate the progress of achieving the SDG 7 to benefit the world as a whole, and maybe even like ways that we as individuals could start to make that change in our own little nooks of the world?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think one thing that that I want to start by talking about is just is kind of what I was talking about at the end of the presentation. There is that there's now an opportunity to kind of go in your own communities and work on increasing the adoption of renewables and adoption of modern energy technologies, and kind of educate the people around you on what that means. And this doesn't have to be in kind of a working in a business sense. There's also a lot of good work that can happen in a nonprofit sense in the form of just education. I think that has a really positive impact. One thing that has been found is that when you provide things like solar panels to communities, but you don't, also bring with that the education on what this means and how they can best use it, then it actually doesn't really get used for very long. It only lasts for maybe a year after that. But when you also bring in that education aspect, that's when you can really have this kind of long-term impact that I think we will all want to have. The other thing I want to kind of mention here is the sort of political aspect. So a lot of progress in energy is still kind of based in what the political incentives are for doing these sort of things. And if we can get the politicians on our side, then I think that the business people will follow, and essentially all of the infrastructure that we need to really continue electrifying the world and doing so in a renewable way will follow. Unfortunately, we're going through a really tough time right now with the pandemic, and so I think the general public's attention has recently been taken away from energy and climate change and more focused on healthcare for very, very reasonable reasons. But I think that as we sort of progress past the pandemic with vaccine and all these things coming up, I'm hoping that we don't kind of let our guard down further, and we kind of go back to the politicians and remind them, hey, this is another really big issue that could even be more harmful and more violent than what we saw last year with the pandemic. And I'm hoping that instead of distracting people from climate change, this reminds people of how real these sorts of issues are.
Yeah, that's very pertinent. I think politics has a lot to do with it. And so even if we at home, call your senators, make it known that you are caring about this issues, it does cause a domino effect. So yeah, we do have one audience question. Somebody said they would love to know if you did something for the cause while you were in elementary school, maybe for our younger audiences.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think in elementary school, I begun becoming interested in environmental sort of causes, and in my elementary school we had a science fair where students would kind of go through a science project and explore the scientific method and things like this. And one of the things that was going on when I was in elementary school was we had the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. And that was something that was always in the news, at least in the United States at the time, and something that we saw pictures of. I remember especially this picture of I think it was a pelican that was covered in oil and was unable to fly, and that was really, really saddening. And that was kind of my first visual relation to what kinds of issues can happen from the way we're using energy today. And so I worked on for the science fair. I worked on a project that was basically looking at how do underwater plants, aquatic plants, grow differently based on when you put like oil and different contaminants in the water. So that was like, not super scientific, but it was my first kind of exploration of how environmental things and energy and renewables and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that, is planting those seeds for our younger people to start caring about, is wildly important. Like when you said knowledge is really a key. During quarantine, I've been watching some nature documentaries, and it's no wild form of activism in any way, but at least it helps us get outside of our bubble to even know what the earth looks like and has to offer, so that we're really get enraged that people are not caring. And in the nature documentaries, they're often very informative to give the staggering statistics about the amount of grasslands that have been depleted over time. And so for our younger kids to even let them know this is what the world can look like, these are the types of animals that exist, so that they're like, wait a second, I've never seen this before, but I live on this earth and I'm gonna feel passionate to still fight towards this cause, because now I see how beautiful it can be, how important it is. So our next question by the
Absolutely, yeah.
audience, yeah, thank you. So our next audience question is, somebody wanted to know how many people were benefited by the solar project that you did. It was very interesting, and I'm sure they're interested in how it affected the people, how many it did.
Yeah, it's a great question. Let's see, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I'll do some quick maths. And I think on average, the households were, 4 to 5 people, and we implemented it in 10 households. We expect that they've been sharing it with their neighbors to some extent. So I would say somewhere around 80 to 100 people is probably my prediction. Yeah.
That's awesome. And did you get to talk to them and then kind of see how, after implementing your project, how their lifestyle changed?
Yeah. So we did interviews and surveys to really kind of make sure that I think intuitively, it's like, oh, of course we're making a positive impact. But as I mentioned with the example of how things can maybe go wrong sometimes when trying to introduce solar to new communities if you don't educate them and things like this. We were really careful about making sure that making sure that we're actually listening to them and hearing what they have to say, and seeing how their opinions and perspectives are changing over the course of when we first introduced the idea to when we installed the devices, and then after that. And so we have a partner that's a nonprofit organization in Zimbabwe that is located there, and they have helped us out with kind of keeping in touch with the communities since we installed.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. Because the key word really is sustainability. Sometimes we want to put a Band-Aid on a really big wound, but that wound will continue to fester. And so sustainability is really long-term. Longevity is a great emphasis. One other person asked, I would like to ask you if you think achieving the 17 SDGs set by the UN are too ambitious, as many would say. What do you believe the scope of these goals will be in the coming years? One person asks.
That's a great question. So I think it's quite possible that they are too ambitious, in the sense that we might not, there's a good chance that we're not going to hit every single goal, accomplish every single goal by the deadline that's stated. But I don't think that's a problem. I think that's the job of a goal, is to be ambitious and make you strive for more. I think if we had set goals that we knew we were going to reach, then what was the purpose of setting the goal? It's just patting ourselves on the back. So I think having these really ambitious goals that kind of give people a vision of what we could be, how good we could be. I think that's really important, because it reminds people that there's work to be done, and kind of directs them on how we can continue to progress. So I think as we get closer to 2030, I anticipate a refresh of the goals, probably also a rebrand or something like that, just to keep it fresh. But I do think that the goals will be even more amplified and even more ambitious in the next cycle, and they'll probably add some more time for that. But I think that this is it's not an issue. I think it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, I love to hear that. One person asked that they're curious about green technology effects on the environment and your thoughts about that. Now, I'm not sure if green technology is like a phrase or lingo that I'm not familiar with, but yes, this is what one person was asking.
Yeah, this is an important question. I think that a lot of times we like to apply the label green or sustainable to anything that is on the surface, like environmentally friendly or renewable or something like that. But it's not always a binary of whether something is clean or dirty. There's a spectrum of how clean or how green things are. So there are definitely some forms of renewable energy that are not necessarily carbon neutral, for example. So although they're maybe better than coal or better than oil, it's not necessarily the best for the environment at the same time. There's also some environmental consequences to things like to just the habitats and to plants and animals in surrounding areas. For example, a lot of tidal energy installations in the ocean or wind energy have been found to be somewhat harmful to things like fish and birds, and can potentially be really disruptive to these different species. So I think those are very real concerns, and we should be calling them out. But I think for the most part, we have to compare it to what was our next best alternative, and if that was using something non-renewable, then maybe it is for the better. But yeah, it's important to be aware that this is not just a perfectly it's not just a perfect world. Like there's always some negative consequences.
Definitely, completely agreed. One question was there. This is kind of my own question because I have a younger sister who's really interested in really seriously pursuing environmental causes similar to you. And so would you have any advice for people wanting to pursue environmental causes past their high school, past their school? Environmental engineering can be a major offered in some schools, but it is still a growing job market per se. A majority of people still go to pretty widely known like engineering, mechanical, computer science, biology. And so maybe if you have any future plans that you're willing to share to continue being a change maker, it could maybe help some people galvanize those inklings of passion that they have to really to make something of a notable difference in their lifetime.
Totally. Yeah. That's a really good question. So I think that, as you said, the field of environmental engineering and more generally just these various like renewable energy, sustainability related careers and fields are definitely growing. They have not traditionally been the paths that most people take. But I think what we're finding is that a lot of people who maybe several years ago in college studied things like mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, they're finding that they can actually get jobs and get careers in the renewable space after that. And so now that these industries are kind of opening up, I think I saw a number recently that it just said the number of job openings in solar power plants in the United States has started to get in the same neighborhood of what there is in coal, especially because coal is declining. People are losing their jobs. And so a lot of people are kind of shifting to trying to work on this new up and coming field. And I think that the downstream effects of this are that the college majors for studying things more pertinent. So mechanical engineers probably had to do some bit of like fixing and filling in their knowledge afterwards, right? But if you can just learn those things directly in college, like by studying environmental engineering in college, that definitely helps. I think another thing that I found really helpful is that there's actually communities and networks that exist for people who are trying to do exactly what you mentioned, right? Trying to make impact in these fields. And I would recommend anyone who's interested in doing this type of work to find these communities in their local areas and join them and really kind of join the conversation. Because I think you'll find that there's a lot of really, really cool people working in this field already. And you can, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can kind of talk to them and they can give you like more kind of specified guidance and feedback on how you can kind of work on these areas in your own local community. That's something that has personally helped me a lot. And I think these communities are really growing, and especially even virtually over the pandemic, there's various platforms that they're using to kind of stay in touch and continue to nurture these sorts of these projects and reading communities and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And what I guess in this pandemic now we have to kind of look at things that we have been doing and reframe our perspective. So people, it's not really possible to go to Zimbabwe and do an awesome project in this global climate. So I guess what have you been doing in your time when you were forced to be at home, and what might you encourage other people to do, sitting from their laptop at home, how they could still be involved to help the cause? If you could give like some tidbits of advice.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. So something that I've been more involved with in the past year, I guess maybe it probably has something to do with, as you mentioned, the pandemic kind of limiting how much physical projects and things you can do, is I've been getting a lot more into kind of mentorship and outreach and kind of creating these opportunities for other people as well. So this is something I'm involved with on campus. Like I mentioned, I ran kind of this global hackathon virtually over the pandemic, where we had hundreds of people from tens of countries around the world participating, and 50% of them had never ever like even thought about like doing projects in renewable energy before. And I think that was really, really amazing to me to be able to kind of introduce all these new people to something that I care deeply about. And hopefully now, after going through a week of working on this type of project, they're also excited about it. I'm also working on a project to kind of connect students at my university with energy companies and energy startups, and start doing internships and projects with these companies, as opposed to going to the more traditional tech companies or consulting and career pathways like that. So that's what I personally have been doing during the pandemic to kind of further this cause, is try and multiply my impact by getting more and more people to join the cause. But I do think that despite the limitations of not being able to do physical projects, I think that there's a lot of project kind of work that can be done in a virtual context. As I mentioned, like there's work that can be done in terms of doing the business kind of work, as well as doing outreach kind of work. And there's a lot of engineering and science that can be done virtually. And I think that the growth in energy hasn't really stopped. And I've seen a lot of really cool innovation being coming out even in the last year.
Yeah, I'm really thankful for the internet that allows us to continue this work in a way that maybe we're not doing so much field work because of the pandemic, but we can continue doing things in business fields, in other spaces like what you said, and continue making that domino effect. One question that was said was people, you mentioned in your own project that you did in high school that often cost becomes this barrier where people are willing to just do it the non-sustainable, wasteful way, because ultimately it comes down to money and it's cheaper that way. In some phrases, there have been cases where like it is actually cheaper to do renewable energy in comparison to fossil fuel strength, but I'd love if you talk a little bit more about that and explain, how it kind of balances out, and obviously ethically it's better to go renewably, but maybe there's potential also in a cost sense that's going to improve as well down the line.
Definitely, yeah. So I think like throughout history, renewables have been really, really expensive, and so people have kind of been trained to think that solar and wind are these boutique, expensive kind of niche products that people who are really rich and can afford that luxury are able to use, and then everyone else is just going to use the standard, whatever is coming through the pipes and coming through the wires is the fossil fuels, right? But I think that although the general public has continued to believe this for like 30 years, the science has changed significantly in that time. And as you mentioned, there are many renewable technologies, particularly solar and wind, that are actually cheaper than coal. So I showed a graph in my presentation that showed that even by 2017, at least in North America, it was cheaper to be using cheaper to be using solar and wind than to be using coal. And that's a really, really big shift, because the truth is that although we, in a perfect world would be ignoring costs and going with, the environmentally more beneficial option, we live in, most of us live in a capitalist kind of society where everything is driven by, what is the economically stable decision. And I think that, we have to kind of embrace that. We can't run away from it. And so we should be continuing to focus on how can we reduce the cost as much as possible, so as to improve our argument for making these new technologies. I think the main issue right now is not in the kind of long-term costs. And there's no question that solar is cheaper in the long term. The more open question is the capital costs. So how much does it initially cost to manufacture and install the systems? And that's something that has also started to come down. And so there's I think in the last few years, this has kind of been unquestionable now that it doesn't make sense for anyone to say, oh, solar is expensive anymore, because it's just objectively not expensive anymore. And so I'm hoping that this opens up a lot of innovation on the business side on how can we take this really good, cheap technology and find ways to implement it and sell it to people.
Definitely. It's really encouraging to hear things like that. And I know in your presentation, you talked about energy independence and how it's often better and more sustainable to play to the naturally occurring resources that are in that environment, and taking advantage of that current environment that a community is in to then make it more sustainable and energy efficient. One person was curious if you thought in general, overall, there is one single best form of renewable energy that could be maybe loosely adopted in a generalistic sense, just doesn't matter where you're in.
Yeah, so I guess I believe pretty fundamentally that there is none, that there is no like single catch-all best form of renewable energy. So I guess like solar panels have improved a lot in the last few years, to the point where you can actually use solar energy when it's cloudy. Like solar is now even efficient where I live, with all the cloudy weather and stuff. So solar has gotten a lot better, but there's parts of the world that literally don't have sun for like 2 months in a row. So I think that this means that there can't be one thing that everyone uses. One thing that I am a little positive about that isn't usually classified as renewable energy, but is cleaner than fossil fuels is nuclear. I think that from a cost perspective and efficiency perspective, nuclear has really good potential, and it's been used for a long time. We understand it pretty well, and pretty much the main reason why we don't see nuclear being used everywhere is because of the kind of fear factor. There have been some issues in the past where we're a little bit scared about it, but it is significantly cleaner than using fossil fuels, and although it is technically non-renewable, it's much less non-renewable than something like oil, which we're going to run out of much sooner.
Yeah, definitely. That's really insightful. And I did have one very serious, important off-script question for you. I've loved hearing about your thoughts on renewable energy, but did you hear what the wind turbine himself said about his thoughts on renewable energy?
I did not.
He said he's a big fan.
I love that.
And so am I.
Maybe.
We had one last question from the audience. Could you shed some light on the kind of analytical work that you do, specifically in the tools that you use? He said, or they said, given the times, this could be a way to develop an understanding of these technologies and get prepared.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think there's a lot of cool things that you can do with analytics and data science to kind of make contributions in the energy space. There's a lot of public open source data sets that exist that are put out by governments and non-governmental organizations that kind of document various energy related quantities. A lot of governments are actually mandated to be releasing this information. And so you can use these to do analytics on trying to figure out, what kinds of energy are growing in different parts of the world, how the costs are changing, and kind of try and predict the markets and figure out, what kind of projects would you want to do and get better projections on how our growth towards renewables is going. So I personally, as a computer science student, I'm pretty excited about these kinds of data approaches, and it's a lot of what I study in school is this kind of stuff like artificial intelligence and data science, and trying to use a more computational approach to solving some of these problems. And actually, there's been a lot of recent research that uses these kinds of interesting algorithms and machine learning and things like that to kind of optimize our usage of renewables. Like you can use certain algorithms to optimize how much energy you're using when you have a solar panel and a battery, and trying to modulate how much of the energy goes from the solar panel to your devices or how much goes into the battery. Things like this are really open to contribution from just like a purely computational perspective. And of course, that's something that given the pandemic, we can all kind of work on right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dhruvik. I think that pretty much wraps up our question, considering we have almost a couple minutes left and we still have some more things to do, such as our mentee questions. It has been truly inspirational to talking to you, and I'm sure it has opened the eyes of many out there. So now we're going to kind of see what they have to say through their responses of the mentee questions. So let us share the screen. So our first question for our audience is, as individuals, how can we utilize our resources to bring about a change and help achieve these SDGs? And we have a beautiful water droplet picture. You can wait for the answers to trickle in. If you are joining in late, please go to www.mentee.com and use the code 4873303 to answer these questions. One person said, stop wasting resources. I love it. I'm straight to the point. It's very, yes, comprehensive. Love that. Use resources wisely. Aha. I also completely agree. I think that one thing that we're all probably doing a lot during our time at home is going on our phones and consuming media, being on social media. And so I talked about watching, nature documentaries. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but also just on social media, spreading awareness, making your cause and your passion known to those around you so that they're also empowered to make change. One person said, take small efforts within our own homes. Completely, definitely. Give more time and effort regularly. Educate others. Okay, awareness. Save little things like electricity when not in use. I love that. Minimize wastage and work towards catering renewable forms of energy. Definitely, like Dhruvik was talking about, really talking about what is renewable energy, why does it matter to your parents, the people, your neighbors, and getting to learn about how you can start to implement those options in your own community. Educate another when get an opportunity, definitely. Take the initiative within you, love that. Live consciously, help spread awareness, take the effort to learn up on such crucial topics, and take them up as your research. Wonderful. Yeah, if you have the opportunity to do research and you're really passionate about this topic, it's a space that there's a lot to learn and a lot to do research on. Live conscientiously, efficient use of resources, help spread awareness, and start a process that can sustain utilization. I love this. So this is all very, very on the note that I think we're trying to hit, that there's always something that we can do, no matter where we are, no matter how many resources that we have. And yeah, so our next question is, how can aspiring change makers like us promote community involvement to support this movement? And we have a beautiful picture of hands making a heart with paint. Yeah, there's a lot to do in our community. I think even having a conversation about it, I'm sure you've had an instance, Dhruvik, when you happen to talk about what you're passionate about to somebody, and you help them have a spark of interest of like, wait, I never thought about this before. But once we start talking about it, we realize how important it is.
Definitely. Yeah, I think a lot of, traditionally we think that there's people on both sides of this issue, but I think what I found is by talking to people who haven't really thought that much about renewables yet. It's not that they disagree with you; it's just that they, haven't had the exposure to the, the sources you had, and if you just talk to them, I think people are generally very open to learning more about these kinds of things and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Things like, should we take care of the planet that we live on? When distilled down, cannot be a partisan issue because we all have to live on this planet. One person said, be a part of it. Talking to friends, be a role model to people, educating neighbors, which I think is a great thing. We had a person come to our house in Nashua that was wanting to offer solar panels, and it was such a foreign concept, but through learning about what it was, now in my neighborhood at least, we have some houses that have solar panels, and that's how that change gets made, slowly. Motivate people, help people, talking to friends, spread awareness, gather friends, do our best. I like that one. That you can only always do your best. Act your mind out, involve youth, and yeah, these all seem really similarly about talking about just even your closest circle, your friends. Travel and observe once it is safe. Um, and yeah, this is really beautiful. Thank you all for your responses. We'll probably move on now to a relaxation. And before we do that, I will just get in my little closing tidbit because then we can do our relaxation and slowly end quietly from there. Just wanted to say that we really hope that you enjoyed this session as much as we did preparing for it. We let us always strive to do our best and support this cause, spreading awareness and helping everyone work towards transforming, millions of lives slowly as we exist and move on in our lives can truly impact everybody's future and promote global peace and prosperity. Let's take this responsibility and strengthen our objectives to do everything we can. On this note, let us end quietly with a relaxation. Thank you all so much for joining. We hope you had a great time. We hope you learned a lot. And maybe with the calmness or the relaxation, everything you've learned will sit deeply and we will allow ourselves to make that change. We will see you in our next sessions as we proceed on this remarkable journey, exploring the SDGs. Thank you so much, Dhruvik.
Thank you.
All right, so I will now do a relaxation so that we can end this topic in a peaceful state and continue being change makers in our own ways. Please sit comfortably and close your eyes very softly and gently. We will begin with the toes. Wiggle your toes. Now feel them relax. Relax your ankles and feet. Feel the energy move up from Mother Earth, up your feet, to your knees, relaxing your legs. Relax your thighs. The energy moves up your legs, relaxing them. Now, deeply relax your hips, stomach, and waist. Relax your back. Feel your body softening. Now from the top to the bottom, your entire back is completely relaxed. Breathe. Relax your chest and shoulders. Feel your shoulders simply melting away. Relax your upper arms. Feel every muscle tendon soften and relax in your forearms, your hands, right up to your fingertips. Relax your neck muscles. Feel safe and calm. Move your awareness up to your face. Relax your jaw. Let your tongue fall down from the roof of your mouth, your nose, your eyes, your earlobes, all your facial muscles, forehead, all the way up, scanning to the top of your head. Feel how your body is now completely submerged in relaxation. Breathe. Move your attention to your heart. As you rest there, gently have the idea that the source of light is illuminating your heart from within and is attracting or pulling your attention inward. Feel immersed in the love and the light in your heart. Breathe in, breathe out. Remain still and quiet. Slowly become absorbed in yourself. Remain absorbed in this deep silence for as long as you want, until you feel ready to come out again. Beautiful. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you continue your day with as much peace, love, and passion to make a difference for a better world. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Jenny, for leading the event today and being our wonderful MC. And thank you so much, everyone, for making it out today for this session. I really enjoyed my time, and thank you so much for the opportunity. And I hope that everyone learned something and as Jenny said, can really take this and move forward. And yeah, thank you so much for the Heartfulness Institute for putting this event on. And I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Dhruvik.